I was born about 2 miles southwest of Edgeley, North Dakota, in 1919, and I I don't remember it for some reason or another. But anyway, that's what my mother told me, and it's on a farm. And in 1919, not very many babies were born in a hospital and so on, and they were still being born in their home, and that's what my mother practiced anyway. And I think, as I recall, only one of my brothers and sisters was born in any kind of institutional situation. They were all born at home or at grandma or grandpa's house. My father did not own his own land, so he was a renter, and renters had practically no rights at all. As far as all they could do was to work the land and take out what they could, and they had to share it with the landlord. We had to move. We were living on what was called the Stott Farm in Montpelier Township. We moved onto it in 1923. When we moved onto it, the basement underneath the house, there was a cellar underneath the house, not a basement. We settled in a very cold winter. I think it was winter of 1923. When it warmed up in the spring, a whole bunch of snakes came out of the basement. There were rats in the basement on top of that. I must have been 10 or 11 years of age when we started on farm machinery. I think I was riding a hay mower for cutting hay and alfalfa and things like that. We had horses that I don't think would have ever run away because they were too tired. We raked, drove horses on the mower. I drove horses on the hay rake, and I must have been 10 or 11 years old at the time of doing that, because you started early on those farms.
Yeah.
And Dad was doing other things. One of the things I remember was Eugene and I were out in the field. We were bunching hay, and we looked towards the house, and there was smoke coming from the end of one of the hay piles near the buildings. And we looked, and it looked like the stack was on fire, and our hay racks, we had two hay racks that were still in between the haystacks near the buildings. Gene got on the hay rake with me, and we went home with the horses trotting. And by the time we got there, one of the stacks was really burning at that time, and I tried to pull the hay racks out of the way so that they wouldn't burn up, but I couldn't. The horses were excited, and we were excited, and the hay racks burned along with the hay. I should say just a few things about walking. It's good exercise. It must have been 1935 being the second semester of my first year in high school. I got up in the morning. I think I milked a couple of cows with my father, and then got into my winter clothes and so on, and ready to walk to school. It was bitterly cold. I didn't know how cold it was. But I stopped at one of our neighbors by the name of Millspaw on the way to school, and I just knocked on the door, and they weren't out of bed yet. And I said, "I'm cold," and I was just very, very cold. And so he got up and he started the fire, and I stood close to the stove while it warmed up. I got warmed up, and then I went on to school, about another mile and a half. When I got to school, and the only reason I went was because we had state board examinations in North Dakota at that time, and it was the day for state board examinations, colder than blazes. And I got to school, and the fountain pen that I had in my pocket, it was a Schaefer pen. I took it out, and the ink was frozen in it, and so I had to hold it over the register to get it warmed up so I could write the examinations.
Dad, could you tell me what were you doing when Japanese bombed Pearl Harbor?
I was working in western North Dakota for the Farmers Union Oil Company. Andrew Krasinski was the manager of the station at South Hart. It was Sunday, what was it, December 7th?
Yes, 1941.
I was the only employee that was working at the Farmers Union Oil Station on Sunday morning because they stayed open until noon or even into the afternoon on Sunday because people were always dropping in for gasoline or something like that. And I was sitting in the station. There was nothing going on at the moment. And then I had the radio on, and then all of a sudden the radio blurted out that Pearl Harbor was being bombed. Almost immediately it was attributed to the Japanese. I don't think I sat down the rest of the day. I took my basic training, and then almost about 6 or 8 weeks, they started me at aircraft engine school. I finished that. Then I was given over to Air Corps Supply. And the Air Corps Supply was, in other words, supplying the parts for airplanes and so on that were being repaired or new parts were needed or something like that. And that was on the flight line. When they found out I could type, I was called to squadron headquarters. And then I worked in the office, which was much quieter.
Yeah.
Then I think as the threat to the West Coast, they started moving some of us out of there. I had made sergeant by the time I left. I left in January 1943, and I made sergeant at that time. And then they were sent us to weather school at Chanute Field, Illinois, from January until, I think, the middle of May. I finished weather school and applied for teletype maintenance school also. So I was called a teletype maintenance Air Corps weatherman. I finished teletype school, and they sent me to Florida. I wasn't there very long. But anyway, one day I got on the bus to go into Orlando, Florida. About halfway in, a Negro woman got on the bus carrying a 2-year-old child and obviously heavily pregnant with another child. I got up, I was sitting just in front of the door in the back of the bus. You know, buses had 2 doors on them or something like that. And I got up and gave her my seat, and the bus driver stopped the bus. He came back and ordered her out of the seat and told me to sit down. I said, I couldn't do that. I got off the bus and walked the rest of the way into Orlando.
Now, the woman had something to say about that, too. Didn't she tell you to...
Yeah, she put her hand on my arm and said, "Soldier boy, don't cause any trouble."
And she got out of the seat, I imagine.
And anyway, I got up and I left the bus and walked the rest of the way into Orlando. I got on the boat at, it must have been about 6 in the morning. I got on the United States steamship George Washington. We landed at Bombay, now called Mumbai, and it was 44 days from Los Angeles to... But then I was assigned to a airplane I think it was a P-40 airplane. We were checking out the engine and stuff like that. Fixed the engine, did whatever's necessary to it. And then we had to pull through the props because on the radial engines, you had to get the oil out of the bottom pistons because if they started up, they would blow the bottom piston off. The crew chief, myself, and another guy, and the other guy climbed into the cockpit, and he was monkeying around with switches or something like that. And the crew chief and myself were pulling those props through. It so happened that when he threw the switch, it fired. And the propeller went backwards because it wasn't the other. If it's been the other way, it would probably started and probably killed us both. Anyway, I got my fingers. This one here was hit to the bone. You can still see the scars there.
Yeah. Did you get stitches in there?
Oh yes, stitches in all three of them. They stitched up my hand and then somehow wrapped it in. I went back to the barracks, and oh God, it was painful. I got in Calcutta at Barrackpore, which was the headquarters of the 10th Weather Squadron. Had been appointed the head teletype technician for the headquarters, and not only I went out to other stations to check on their teletype machines. Sometimes when it got out of operation, I distributed new machines to weather stations that were opening up, or sometimes the old machines would wear out. In general, I was in charge of almost all the electrical operations of the 10th Weather headquarters of the 10th Weather Squadron. That's what I did during the war.
You had mentioned a story to me once about when you were in India at a particular military camp where a leopard took one of the sentries. What do you remember about that?
That was at Dinjan in the upper Assam Valley. The man that was taken was a sentry in the Indian Army, or he had something to do with the Indian Army that guarded the base. And we didn't, as far as I know, we didn't have any American guards, and the base was under the care of the Indian Army. This man was on guard duty and was attacked by a leopard and probably killed almost immediately and dragged. It wasn't too much. They found him, I think, the next morning, and he had been chewed up a little bit in the jungle not too far from our base. Just carried him in the fringes of the jungle.
So you didn't hear any sounds yourself?
Oh, no. No, it was probably a little far from where our barracks was at that time.
You told me a story once about when you went to work early in the morning in India and when you were in the service, and on the way to work you saw carts being loaded with dead bodies.
Oh, yeah. That was on occasion when I had to drive through Calcutta. And I remember driving through Calcutta in a Jeep, and I must have been on my way to Alipur station or something like that. They were loading the bodies of people who had died during the night right off the street. They were being piled onto a truck.
This is starvation and disease and things like that.
They died of starvation or disease or whatever. I think I probably only saw that 2 or 3 times.
That's enough times, I guess.
That's enough times to see it. When the bomb was dropped, there was that feeling of, this is going to end it. And that was a good feeling. I don't think any of us fully realized, at least in India, the devastation that it caused by the dropping of one atomic bomb. But I think we recognized it as it was ending the war. And we were just delighted with that. The fact that almost immediately I was transferred from the weather station to a deployment station. In October and November, I was flown to Karachi again. And in Karachi, I got on the U.S. General Mintz. As I recall, that was the name of the boat we came home on. We left from there, went through the Arabian Sea, the Red Sea, the Suez Canal, and across the Mediterranean. But anyway, we went through Gibraltar and across the Atlantic and landed in New York. We landed at New York. They sent me to Camp Kilmer, New Jersey, and from there I went back to southern Wisconsin. And I got my discharge there. I went to Cannon Falls for a couple of days. Aunt Edith was there. Then Aunt Edith and I got on the train. I think it probably maybe the same day or the day after anyway. I got off at Jamestown. When I got off the train, Mother was there. I gave her a big hug, but we both fell over.
Is that right? Just lost your balance, or?
Yeah.
Did you fall all the way down to the ground?
Yeah. Some guy came up to me and shook hands and welcomed me home and so on and so forth. We walked back over, and I turned to my dad and I said, "Who was that?" And he says, "That's your brother Marvin."
He'd grown up while you were gone, huh?
Yeah. Then we got in the car and drove home. And I think Mother had made a lemon pie or something like that. Anything else you want to know?
What was the happiest time of your life? I mean, besides this minute right now.
Or one of the happiest.
Yeah, some of the happiest moments of your life.
7 of them. 8 of them, yeah.
One of the happiest was in the woods at St. John's when your mother said yes.
I was born on a farm about 5 miles southwest of Eden Valley, Minnesota. I have a few early memories of that. I was the oldest. I can remember going out in the field with my dad. At that time, he just worked with horses. Horses were pulling the mower. There was no tractors in our farm at that time. I know too that I went out with him and he'd have a box and I'd sit in that box in front of him, and I suppose he took me along so I wouldn't wake up my little brother who was the baby in the house. Perhaps that's why it was. Sometimes he'd take me to town with him. And my mother would complain that she'd dress me up on all these little fancy clothes that at that time had to be ironed and, and then he would give me some licorice candy and I'd come home completely messed up.
Is there anything special that you want to say to us, Dad, on your birthday today?
I haven't given it any thought, frankly,
Oh.
on what I would like to say, except you're kind of lucky making it to 88. I never thought I'd make it.
Pulling up work.
The doctor's office the other day said I'm in pretty good condition.
Great.
So, I don't know. It's just good to be here.
That's good to have you here.
Thank you.
Where were you?
Can I add something to this?
Yeah, why don't you have some?
When we were in our middle 40s or so, I said, well, we should be putting something away for retirement. And he said, oh, I don't expect to be 65, and Medicare will take care of you.
Long in both counts.
I don't remember saying that. But I probably did.
Yeah.
I was foolish and younger then.
Well, I'm certainly glad that we can have this day together and with Linda.
And I'm very proud of my grandchildren. They're some of the best people in the world. Aren't you?
Their mom wants his name.
Uh-huh.
Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear Dad. Happy birthday to you. How old are you now? How old are you now? How old are you, Dad? How old are you now? God bless you today. God bless you today. God bless you, dear Dad. God bless you always. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear Dad. Happy birthday to you. And many more. Okay.
Yeah, am I supposed to blow it out now? Oh.
You gonna help?
No.
Mara's gonna help.
All set?
Yeah.
I think so.
Bill, why don't you open yours first?
Why don't you open yours first?
Oh, all right. I just needed to an excuse. This card has a tight fit in here.
Hi. How are you?
Hello!
Some art people. Oh, isn't that a pretty card?
Sure.
Barnes and Noble's gift card.
Yeah, I know
Thank
you
you.
like books.
Yes,
Sure.
one of my favorite gifts.
So have fun picking yourself out one.
Yes, I will. Thank you.
Okay, you're welcome.
Thank you very much.
Dad will never guess what he's gonna get now.
Pardon me, what did you say?
I don't think Dad's ever gonna guess what he's.
Oh, can you guess what you're getting?
I think it's probably the same thing for mine.
You're right, Dad.
Yeah,
Hi.
that's very nice.
Yeah,
Thank you.
thank you very much.
Thank you. You shouldn't.
I've missed you.
Shouldn't.
Like I spoke to you a little bit.
Oh,
Oh, we'll try to find one enjoyable and informative.
Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you, dear.
You're welcome.
My goodness.
yeah.
Now,
People
let's see
keep
here.
Wait, what's with the camera pole?
Compensating.
Does this look good?
Well, I have like a pole coming out. Is that normal?
It's for when you have too much coffee.
The birth of Jesus. In those days, Caesar Augustus published a decree ordering a census of the whole world. This first census took place while Quirinius was governor of Syria. Everyone went to register, each to his own town. And so Joseph went down from the town of Nazareth in Galilee to Judea, to David's town of Bethlehem, because he was of the house and lineage of David, to register with Mary, his espoused wife, who was with child. While they were there, the days of her confinement were completed. She gave birth to her firstborn son, and wrapped him in swaddling clothes, and laid him in a manger, because there was no room for them in the place where the travelers lodged. There were shepherds in that region, living in the fields and keeping night watch by turns over their flocks. The angel of the Lord appeared to them, as the glory of the Lord shone around about them, and they were very much afraid. The angel said to them, "You have nothing to fear. I come to proclaim good news to you, tidings of great joy to be shared by the whole people. This day in David's city, a Savior has been born to you, the Messiah and Lord. Let this be a sign to you. In a manger you will find an infant wrapped in swaddling clothes." And suddenly there was with the angel a multitude of heavenly hosts, praising God and saying, "Glory to God in high heaven, peace on earth to those on whom his favor rests." When the angels had returned to heaven, the shepherds said to one another, "Let us go over to Bethlehem and see this event which the Lord has made known to us." And they went in haste, and found Mary and Joseph, and the baby lying in a manger. And once they saw, they understood what had been told them concerning this child. And all who heard of it were astonished at the report given them by the shepherds. Mary treasured all these things and reflected on them in her heart. The shepherd returned, glorifying and praising God for all they had heard and seen, in accord with what had been told them. The Gospel of the Lord.
Thank you, Dad.